The shortage of Black women on television is not unique. LA was not an outlier. We just didn't break through until fairly recently. The station I joined, the LA station where you watched me for decades, they hadn't had a Black woman since 1985 on camera. They hired me in 1992. So
Uh-huh.
that's 7 years,
years.
which blew my mind when I realized when I got there. And folks said, "Hey, we're glad you're here." Or some were
Uh-huh.
like, I got the affirmative action baby stare. A lot of
Understood.
folks were very dismissive, like, "Oh, we know why you're here." They're
Yeah.
checking a box.
Checking the
Excuse
box.
me, they didn't check the box for 7 years. Don't you think I might be qualified? So I
Thank
had
you.
to push back against that and prove my worth. There were Black women behind the scenes
Mhm.
at the station I joined. And God bless them. They embraced me. They supported me from day one, but they
Right.
also backed my play at work because I'm in the streets. I'm on live TV. I don't know what's being said behind my back when I'm not in the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there was a lot of skepticism. So I
Right.
did my first report, my first live report. It was something benign. And apparently, when I was finished, and I wasn't there to see this, but I heard it later, applause broke out. Like spontaneous applause from all the Black employees, like, she made the cut. She knows what she's doing. We don't have to stress.
Welcome to Inside the Castle Walls, where we share enlightening conversations with contemporary pioneers who scaled walls to change systems, organizations, and themselves to contribute to the greater good. My name's Errol Southers, and I'll be your host for the program. Today, we're joined by the legendary Beverly White, a very dear friend and mentor of mine. Beverly, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for the invitation, Errol. It's always a pleasure.
So as I mentioned to our audience, we're honored to have and host the iconic Beverly White, a dynamic news reporter who's been a fixture on the Los Angeles airwaves for over 30 years and has more than 40 years of experience in the industry. Beverly has captivated audiences while covering major events, including earthquakes, shootings, and reporting on the deaths of music legends like Michael Jackson and Prince. She's also interviewed notable figures such as Nelson Mandela, Maya Angelou, and Desmond Tutu. A veteran colleague described Beverly as a, quote, kick-ass reporter, and her coverage of significant events like the 1994 Northridge earthquake, the protests after George Floyd's murder, and the COVID-19 pandemic showcases her tenacity in journalism. Despite facing institutional challenges, her successful career has resulted in numerous prestigious honors, including the Peabody Award and the Chuck Stone Lifetime Achievement Award. In addition to her achievements, she has dedicated herself to mentoring and supporting the next generation of journalists, which we will highlight in this episode. Beverly, it is an honor to see you and host you today.
It's my pleasure always to talk with you, Errol, anytime, any place.
So you have a better memory than I do because I didn't realize that, and for the audience, I have my start on television thanks to Beverly White, who in 2010 very gently nudged me after there was a major national security incident. I'm not quite sure what it was, but you said, "Why aren't you on television?" And I just stood there and said, "I don't know." And I thought that was our first meeting, but it actually wasn't. We met at the AFTRA Awards, I believe.
That's right. The AFTRA, now Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA is the union, but at the time before merger, it was AFTRA, and they had an event at East West Players, the theater space behind the LAPD Parker Center, old Parker Center.
I did not
And
know that.
you were in the audience. We'd met before, but we took pictures at that occasion. And yes, I'm a bit of a, I don't know, I won't say hoarder, but I do have lots of shoe boxes full of photos. And I was happy to pull up a photo where you and I first met publicly, so to speak, on the record. And I was happy to share that with you since you somehow forgot.
I somehow forgot, but I have it now in my collection. So I want to just start at the beginning. You have been a, let's just say, continental globetrotter when it comes to your career. But, where are you from originally? And tell us how that's all began.
Oh my goodness. I'm from a very small place, but it's not where you start, it's where you end up, right?
That's
I'm
right.
from Killeen, Texas. My dad was Army, Vietnam era, and he
Mm-hmm.
retired in Killeen, Texas, right next to Fort Hood, where one of my siblings was born. I happen to have been born in West Germany during one of Daddy's postings overseas, back when
That's
they
right.
called it West Germany. I was born at Frankfurt Rhine-Main Air Force Base, and we wound up as a family in Texas after all of his adventures, and that's where I graduated high school from the one and only high school at the time in Killeen. I am a proud Killeen Kangaroo.
Okay. And was journalism something that you aspired to go into as a career at that time?
Not necessarily. In high school, I actually took half a day for vocational training because I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. The cosmetology called my name. My sister was doing it, and I thought
Mhm.
I could follow in her footsteps. So I took vocational education, half day, in the cosmetology wing at our high school because they offered all sorts of courses, shop and welding and homemaking and agriculture because it's Texas. And I took Cosmo, as we called it, and almost got my hours toward a license. And then I pivoted and decided on college instead. Took the preliminary SAT and
Uh-huh.
scored higher than a lot of my classmates.
I'm
And
not
that's when
surprised.
colleges started calling. So one thing led to another. And I graduated on time. High school still enabled me to complete my course requirements in addition to the vocational school and march with my peers in a class of more than 900 because we were,
Wow.
again, the only high school.
Uh-huh.
The next year they opened another, and I think now they're up to 4 or 5. But at the time it was overcrowded, but still everything I needed. I had great counselors, very ambitious classmates, including the one who dragged me to take the PSAT. And when we
Okay.
both got good scores, she wound up going to, I believe, Baylor University.
Okay.
And I was recruited by a couple of schools. I won't mention the ones that didn't make the cut, but instead
Okay.
I chose the University of Texas at Austin, and they offered me a pretty good scholarship, which kind of greased the skids. My parents were successful, but not to where they could send 4 kids off to college at the same time. So I was able to
Ah,
pay for most of it on my own
excellent.
and got in and out on time. I won't say on budget because back then student loans were not a thing, but I
No,
didn't owe any money when I crossed the finish line with my
very
degree
good.
in journalism. And I chose journalism in my junior year after having tried and succeeded somewhat in the business college. I
Mm-hmm.
was a business major for 2.5 years. And then I
Oh,
pivoted because the public relations students seemed to be having a lot more fun than us on the basic business track. And
right.
PR had a couple of courses in the communications building where the journalism kids were doing their thing on microphones and cameras, and that caught my eye. So I took a few electives and got an internship the summer before commencement, and I don't know, the hook was set. I found they could pay you to be nosy and ask questions and talk and write, which are things I've always loved to do. So
Uh-huh.
journalism wasn't my first choice, but I landed in it just in time and went to work 2 days after graduation and worked thereafter until recent retirement.
So two things. First, you mentioned journalism wasn't your first choice. Would you mind sharing what was your first choice?
Sure, I was interested in business
Okay.
because I have an older sibling who went to university, different school, different major,
Uh-huh.
and I wanted to, pick up on that track because my parents were not college educated. And I
Okay.
said, well, if we go, we need to finish and do something meaningful. And my
Mhm.
dad said, well, if you go into business, you'll make money, you'll count money. And that sounded good to me. And, that's just the wisdom of the elders. He kind of
Yes.
planted the seed to at least get the degree. And what you do with it is up to you, but at least get a degree in something practical. And to him, practical meant business. So I jumped in and had a pretty good time with it. I was somewhat bored. And I
Mhm.
think that's why the PR curricula caught my attention. And as you know, that led to journalism. But I didn't know any journalists growing up. I'd admired quite a few on television. My maternal grandfather was a huge fan of Walter Cronkite, who he called Walter
Ah.
Contact, because that's what all old Black folks called Walter Cronkite back in the day. And
Uh-huh.
I remember watching the news with him and marveling at someone who could hold him in rapt attention and tell him all about the world beyond his limited environment. And, you know, curiosity is a wonderful thing to plant in a child. And
Yes.
we were avid readers growing up. My parents always had magazines and books around the home. But the news piece started with my maternal granddad and continued with my parents. We
Mhm.
became avid news readers and viewers as a household. So the conversations over dinner tended to, talk about Kent State and Vietnam and civil rights, which we were living and breathing, just as African Americans in these United States.
Uh-huh.
And I realized we were all paying close attention to total strangers delivering information that we trusted.
Right.
How cool would it be to be one of those people delivering the information and not just being the subject of the stories?
Exactly. And I would imagine at that time there weren't many people on the air who looked like us.
Oh, precious few.
Hmm.
Precious few. I remember admiring Lynn Tucker. Oh my goodness, it's a short list of
Hmm.
African Americans who were doing the TV thing.
Right.
On the other hand, because my grandfather in particular, but all of my grandparents on both sides of the family, avid readers and subscribers far back as I can remember to the Black press. So my
Okay.
grandparents in Alabama subscribed to the Amsterdam News
I remember
out of
that.
New York City. They
Yes.
also took sepia, ebony, as
Yeah.
budgets permitted, and Jet Magazine was
Uh-huh.
required reading. So long story, made even longer. Simeon Booker was the Washington correspondent for Jet Magazine. I
Uh-huh.
met him because of a journalism organization I later joined in my career. And he, without even knowing it, inspired me to choose journalism.
You
He
know,
wrote for
you're
Jet Magazine, and I met him and bought his book and had him autograph it for me.
That's fantastic. Your house sounds like mine as it comes to reading material. When you mentioned Ebony, Jet Magazine, Sepia, Amsterdam News, that's incredible. So you were bitten by the journalism bug, and now you're a Texas girl. So tell me how that all started with you even considering leaving your home state. Because I know a lot of Texans, and they're Texans forever. So what would make you move and leave Texas?
Well, my first couple of TV jobs were in Texas, which was a
Hmm.
comfort to my parents, obviously, and also to me, because I went to university at 16, graduated at 20. So I was still kind of young
No
when I
kidding.
really got my life started in a professional way.
Hmm.
So I started in Waco, Texas, which is not too far from Killeen, to be honest. So my parents could still see me. In fact, they remain my biggest fans
Uh-huh.
because they saw my early work when I was shiny and terrible writing, and the presentation wasn't anywhere close to what it was supposed to be. But
Okay.
that's what small market television is for. And you work out your kinks, you make your mistakes, you gain your voice and your confidence. So Waco is where I started right after leaving UT Austin.
Hmm.
They lots of schools have job fairs, and I attended a few. And I realized I wasn't getting any nibbles. Let me go find my job. So I
Okay.
borrowed a car and ventured across state, which is a big old state. So I hit the road for spring break and shopped my internship resume tape because you do create content as an intern. They put you on TV for, fluffy features. I did a few terrible stories, but at least it proved I was ambitious. So
Right.
I had something to show. And I showed that around, oh my God, I can name the places I interviewed. You could just show up back in the day. You didn't have to make an appointment, and it wasn't on Zoom, and it wasn't as formal as the job search process tends to be now.
Sure.
So I got the broadcasting and cable yearbook from the school library, looked up all the Texas markets. Which ones can I drive to inside of a week and a couple of days? Because I had, spring break and a borrowed car. So I went to Midland, Odessa, and Abilene, and San Angelo, and Corpus Christi,
Wow.
and Waco. Waco was the last stop because it's close to home.
Right.
So I showed my reel. I even left a few copies because on my limited college budget, I could make some copies of my reel. So I left 3/4 inch tapes all over Texas, or at least shared them and viewed them with people who may or maybe not had jobs.
Hmm.
Finally, the Waco station called the week before commencement, and I started working for them. As soon as they said, come, I said, what day? When do you need me? I marched on Saturday, went to work on Monday.
Outstanding.
1981. Yes, I'm telling my age. I'm not ashamed.
Uh, so at that time, I mean, I'm going to guess there was no NABJ. Was there an organization like that? Were people around that you could say you might call mentors, or at least people that you could talk to for counsel?
It's funny you should ask about NABJ, the organization, the National Association of Black Journalists. I'm a fond long-term member. It did exist when I
Oh,
graduated,
really?
but I
Oh,
went to a predominantly white institution. I was one of a handful of Black students at my school. I never heard of NABJ, neither had my professors. So if people don't tell you these clubs and networking opportunities exist, they don't exist. I
right.
learned of NABJ on my third, maybe fourth professional job. Let me think. Waco lasted almost 3 years. Then I
Okay.
worked shocked myself again because I needed a new job, more money. Wound up in San Antonio after Waco, and
Hmm.
after San Antonio, I landed in Cincinnati, Ohio. So yes, I did leave Texas because of the
Okay,
pay. I
got
love
it.
Texas, but at least the places I worked at the time, the joke was they pay you in sunshine. And
Hmm.
I needed to pay my bills, and I
Hmm.
wanted to, do better. Who doesn't? So after 3 years in Waco, about 16 months in San Antonio, I found the opportunity in Cincinnati. And wouldn't you know, in Cincinnati, there were quite a few Black folks in
Uh-huh.
front of and behind the camera. They told me about NABJ. So I
I
attended my
see.
first NABJ convention in 1986, of all places, Dallas, Texas. I had to get on a plane and go back to my home state to attend my
Uh-huh.
first National Association of Black Journalists convention. And with just a couple of exceptions, I've been going every year, every summer, ever since.
And I have thanks to you and your husband Xavier who for getting me to NABJ, and I had a featured panel where he was the host, along with some other iconic people like,
Bill
Malcolm
Whitaker.
Nance and Bill Whitaker, and who would have ever thought I'd sit at a table with Bill Whitaker? But thank you both. So, what kinds of things were you covering then? I know as your career developed, you covered everything, literally from hurricanes to fires, floods, civil unrest. But what kinds of things were you covering then? Or did you cover
Then
everything?
pretty much everything. A lot of reporters are blessed with the chance and the managers who enable them to specialize. And I
Hmm.
had specialty beats from time to time over my career. In Cincinnati for a short time, I was an education reporter. I
Oh,
covered school
really?
board and those meetings that pertain to school issues consistently. That was my
Uh-huh.
beat, and I loved it. But you deviate depending on the needs of your organization. So
Right.
when I started and when I finished, I was what we call a GA reporter. That's general assignments, otherwise known as the Swiss Army knife. You go everywhere, you do anything. And
Uh-huh.
I was cool with that because why did I get into journalism? To learn things, meet people, tell stories. And we're what masters of how do they put it? An inch wide, a mile, no, a mile wide, an inch
It's
deep.
deep. Uh-huh.
Yes, that's your average GA journalist. We don't proclaim to be experts in everything, but we know where to go get it, to find the people who can fill in the blanks and help us illuminate a topic in typically 2 minutes or less for any given subject to any given viewership. So from Waco, where I covered, yes, a lot of crime because I was
Hmm.
in the Killeen Fort Hood Bureau.
I
Waco
see.
is a huge market. It again, it's small, numbers wise. It might have been 98th out of some 200 television markets in the nation.
Oh,
And
wow.
markets are distinguished by population. So
Uh-huh.
teeny tiny would be Guam. Yes, there are English speaking journalists in Guam.
Okay.
And a lot of my friends wound up interviewing in places like that, smaller than mine. And I thought Waco was small, but there's
Hmm.
much smaller, trust me.
Hmm.
So when I started in Waco, Waco was 98th on the flow chart. I went
Wow.
from Waco to San Antonio, which at the time was 56. From 56, I went to Cincinnati, which is 28. From
Hmm.
Cincinnati, I went to Miami, which is 16. From Miami, which is 16, I went to number two, Los Angeles, where I met you. So the sizes of the markets and yes, the paychecks that come with it,
Right.
based on population and advertising revenues and all those business side things that
Hmm.
maybe as a business major I would have paid more attention to. But as a journalist, I was solely focused on stories and where they assigned me, I would go. And like you described, natural disasters, a lot of social justice issues, not
Hmm.
just crime, but court cases. Depending on my schedule, if I worked a day shift, I could cover courts. If I worked nights, I could cover the aftermath. I didn't cover, for instance, the Conrad Murray trial. The gentleman later
Oh.
found, responsible for the death of Michael Jackson. But
Yes.
I covered the aftermath. So when court day was over, I inherited all of the videos and distilled them into a 2 minute report for the 11 o'clock news every
Wow.
day of the Conrad Murray trial. So you could say I was a courts reporter for that short stint. But before and after, if it blew up or burned down, they sent me to that too.
Wow.
Wildfires, tsunami threats. Never a real tsunami, but on the West Coast, y'all had tsunami threats based
That's
on
right.
earthquakes, in other places. And evacuation orders would kick in. Likewise, wildfires, mudslides, crime scenes. You mentioned Prince and Michael Jackson off the top of the interview. So many other celebrity passings come to mind.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin. When Aretha passed, she was nowhere near Los Angeles. But because Aretha's a major international superstar,
Uh-huh.
there are performing artists living and breathing in Los Angeles who worked with her. could speak knowingly and lovingly of the Queen passing away, which was a shock to any music lover. And
Yeah.
because I'm connected with my community, I'm proud to
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
I called on some people I know in the church. And most church organists in Los Angeles and music directors in Los Angeles come from the professional space. And
Right.
sure enough, I found an organist at a local church who
Uh-huh.
had toured with Aretha. So when we told the Aretha Franklin story, we didn't just do generic, here's some file video from the Grammys, like a correspondent might do in another place. When you
Hmm.
work in LA, Chicago, Miami, New York, you have access to the
Right.
people who make the music happen, who produce and direct the movies and the entertainment of all kinds. So
Hmm.
again, the passing of Aretha wasn't just a gut check for all of us, her body of work. She performed many times in that community and all over the world. I've seen her twice in concert. I actually met her once backstage. Another story for another time.
Hmm.
But talking about her passing and making it personal for our viewers, like there's more to reread than you think. Let's talk to
Yeah.
somebody who knew her back in the day. I was able to find three people who answered the call. Of course, they're grieving. She's a friend, she's a former
Yeah.
colleague.
Yeah.
And just to put that secret sauce in stories like that is what I think distinguished my career. I'm not bragging or complaining, but it's facts. If you pick up the phone and you maintain good relationships with all kinds of people,
Hmm.
someday their wealth of knowledge will benefit you. If you ask the right way, I mean, not everybody wants to go on television and talk about people they knew who've
That's
passed
right.
away.
That's right.
But if you come at them the right way and remind them, if you don't tell it, nobody else will. This story will
Hmm.
die with you if you
Hmm.
choose not to share it with us now, in this moment where the whole world is talking about Aretha Franklin or Prince or Kirstie Alley. I mean, people have passed away during my time in LA and in other communities too, but most recently in LA because I spent the bulk of my career in Hollywood.
Right. Right.
I didn't cover red carpets on a regular basis, but I knew people who walked the red carpets. I knew people who unspooled the red carpets because that's how I roll. When I
Yeah.
meet
Yeah.
people who have interesting jobs, and it doesn't matter what they're being paid or where they were educated, I just find it captivating that my career, my choice of field of endeavor of journalism enabled me to put a spotlight on folks who might never get to share their unique perspectives on all kinds of places and people. It it lifts my spirits just thinking about it. Those are the fondest memories I have of
Wow.
amplifying stories from
Uh-huh.
folks who walk among us and never maybe even told their families all the
Right.
cool things they did before they settled down and became the church organist.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, you brought to light careers of people in their passing, but again, you've interviewed some iconic historic figures like Nelson Mandela and Maya
Not
Angelou.
quite, not quite. I covered Mandela's visit to the States,
I
and
see.
I was part of a scrum. It's what they call it when you have a horde of journalists in the same space shouting.
Yes.
I attended a scrum with Nelson Mandela,
Okay.
and I do believe he answered my question, but
That's
he
close
had
enough.
others shouting at him. So I wouldn't portray that as an intimate one-on-one interview. But when he came to the States after he was freed, I want to say 1991.
Hmm.
He went to DC, Detroit. I was actually sent every now and then we travel. My Miami station sent me to Atlanta, Georgia, because he spoke at the Georgia Dome on I think the University of Georgia campus where the Bulldogs play. And
Right.
he spoke there, and he also spoke at Dr. King's Eternal Flame. That's where I encountered Mandela.
I
And
see.
so it is awkward to shout questions at what is a sacred space, because Dr. King is interred there. On the other hand, we were given the occasion to get close to Mr. Mandela and
Hmm.
and voice our questions, and he did take a few, which
So
is
as I,
interesting because years later, my husband was like one on one with forgive me, with Mandela when he came to First AME Church.
oh, I
So
did
now,
not
how
know
did that
that.
happen? That we're all chasing Mandela in different spaces because he's been to America more than once after he
Yes.
was freed.
Hmm.
But it was the first time when he was first freed that
Hmm.
he visited Georgia, and I encountered him there. And then years later, I met my husband, we married, and wound up in LA. And he's the one on the sidewalk with Mandela, while the rest of us reporters are locked in the church, waiting for the chance to maybe breathe the same air as Mr. Mandela.
Uh-huh.
Xavier's outside the whole time, and they're having a nice little chat. So
Typical Xavier.
yes, he liked to tease me that you only shouted at Mandela. I got close enough to talk to the man.
Oh, that's Xavier, as we know.
Yes, yes.
So, we're going to get to LA, but I want to, again, you hadn't finished your cross country jaunts. I believe you spent some time in New York. And then you talked to me about once.
I never worked in New York, just visited.
Okay, just visiting New York. But you mentioned a group that was, how should I say this, humorously referred to as the Missouri Mafia. What was that all about?
I've had news directors, I can count at least 5, who attended the University of Missouri, one of the nation's best journalism schools. And they joke among themselves. It's like an alumni association of professional journalists. A lot of them are on camera and they're directing and producing, or they moved on and didn't stay in journalism at all. But a cohort from Mizzou, that's what they call the school, the Mizzou Mafia, have had significant influences in the industry. And I've worked for several, and laughed about the fact that they knew each other, but had no real reason to know or talk about me. I've just had bosses who have that baseline in common, which just goes to show the school you choose can make a difference. Nothing against community college, and I did some hours at community college to get ready for university because I didn't know what I was getting into, and my parents couldn't tell me because they had never been. But when you choose a school and you know what you want to do in life, or you have a legacy at the school or just a relationship with the school, and you know they offer exactly what you need, go for it. Because those relationships that, again, the networking, which has become kind of cliche, but if you have an alumni association, you can scratch that itch and call up somebody.
Right.
I played that card. I went to Texas. It's a major institution. There are Longhorns everywhere you look. And some of them are highly influential across the spectrum, politics, entertainment. I mean, my school, like Mizzou and countless others, have legacy going for them. The challenge I think people face, I mean, lots of them, don't get me wrong, but one that comes to mind, and I've marveled at this, is your choice of schools shouldn't define you, but because life isn't fair, sometimes it does.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And I know when I was a proud member of NABJ LA because of you and Xavier. And there was a significant number of people in NABJ LA from local schools who knew you. And one of the reasons they became members was because of you. But before I get to LA, I think I want to mention that you covered, was Hurricane Andrew before you came to LA?
Hurricane Andrew was exactly before I came to LA and was my swan song in Miami, so to speak.
So let's talk
major
about that.
Story I covered in Florida. Yes, sir.
I bring it up because you won a Peabody for that coverage. And we talked about crank radios, and I'm sure there are people in this audience who don't even know what crank radios are. So talk about that coverage and what did you do? Because I always see people today standing in what are, let's just say, torrential rain or incredible winds trying to stand up and look at a camera. So tell us about you doing that.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I could go right now and dig out literally, I have a t-shirt. And Andrew headlines all over it because those who survived, and everybody on the journalism tip, we didn't lose any colleagues covering Andrew, but the community lost a tremendous amount of loved ones and real estate. And before Katrina, Andrew was the yardstick by which hurricanes were judged. It was the most catastrophic, destructive, and costly hurricane in American history before Katrina. So yes, Andrew's on my resume. And I always have to qualify it when people say, you were honored with this, you were honored with that. I was on a team that was honored with the Peabody.
I see.
Nobody gets a Peabody on their own. And yes, it's probably the proudest moment of my career this side of the NABJ honor, the Chuck Stone Award you mentioned, and that was an individual award that you don't go for. It is bestowed on you. Peabodys, TV shows get Peabodys. It's not just for journalism, but
I still want to say
cultural and
well deserved. Well deserved.
It was I can say this, it's a podcast. It was a hell of a time because I'd done hurricanes before. Coming from Texas, hurricanes aren't simply a gut punch on the coastline. Hurricanes spawn tornadoes hours inland. So I've covered hurricanes in San Antonio. because they spawn tornadoes 6 hours from the shore, and the
Right.
damage, the destruction is so comprehensive. I don't like to do the disaster Olympics because people say, "Oh, you did Andrew. Andrew did the Northridge earthquake. How do they compare?" You can't compare disasters. But
Yeah.
if you have to choose an earthquake. A hurricane is so devastating beyond
Really.
description
Uh-huh.
because swaths of real estate are impacted. The panic is days in advance.
Uh-huh.
Who leaves? Who stays? Who ignores the evacuation order? How do you get grandma out of her condo when she wants to run back and get her dentures? I covered those
Wow.
stories in Florida, but I've also covered and have friends who've covered. Hurricane Rita comes to mind. I didn't cover that one. It was in Houston. But people perished in their cars because they evacuated, and then the rain and the floods met them on the highway.
I did not know that.
Hurricanes do so many things that unless you've lived through one or several, as I have,
Uh-huh.
you don't get the it's a laundry list of things that
Yeah.
can go wrong. Not just the power going out and folks perishing because their oxygen quit and they didn't anticipate that.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned crank radios.
Mm-hmm.
I love the crank radio story. We have one right now. We had one when we lived in LA because when the power goes out, don't just think about your cell phone, think about
Right.
communication in general. How will you keep up on the news when it's
That's right.
time to run, when the storm surge is coming your way, when the tornado touches down on the next block over from your house? How will you know these things? The news radio, that's where journalists come in,
Mm-hmm.
will share the information on citizen band or just basic broadcast radio airwaves. But if you have no power and no juice, how are you going to tune in? That's where the
Exactly.
hand powered radio comes in, or battery
Exactly.
operated. Batteries serve a purpose too, not just for flashlights in the time of emergency. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so many awful things have happened on my watch because this is my job. I am not a first responder per se because I don't go in and save lives, but I go in and witness the people who do. And when they come out with the soggy baby from the house that collapsed because the snow took down the roof,
Mm-hmm.
I did those stories in Ohio. When you interview that firefighter running to the rescue vehicle to put the defibrillator on the infant and
Mm-hmm.
bring him or her back to life, when you get to witness those things or talk
Mm-hmm.
to the people who make those things happen, you realize, I realize every single day what a blessing it was to be a journalist in these times. Not everybody wants to talk, and not everyone has a story they care to share. But when
Right.
they do, or when you're a witness to it, or you get to talk to the person who did witness it or made it happen, you realize people are basically good. And I was blessed with a career for 40 plus years that enabled me to amplify that.
Well, I'm going to thank you because you were a first responder of a different domain that people count on called communications. And in your case, crisis communications, literally, because we're trying to determine what's real, what's not. And in today's world of misinformation and fake news, people really don't know how bad that disaster is. Should I evacuate because they're telling me to leave? Is it really a tsunami warning? But I want to pivot because, as you mentioned, fall of 92 I believe was one about the time you came to LA, which wasn't on your radar. And lo and behold, a lot of things happened that year. And then 2 years later, there was the Northridge earthquake, and you were again in another natural disaster.
You can't plan for these things, and I don't want anybody to think I'm a disaster magnet. But yes, I've been involved in the coverage of a lot of catastrophes that don't have a name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We call it the Northridge earthquake, but the locals actually know it was the Reseda earthquake. Northridge got the handle, but it actually epicenter was later determined to be Reseda. Either
Right.
way, being a witness to that and on assignment that day. Oh my God, I'm really dating myself. I married a man who owned a waterbed. Yes, we had a waterbed. And that's how we knew the earthquake was happening because the waterbed started sloshing around.
I remember those days.
And that's when I realized, okay, something awful is underway. And the phone started. I think I had a beeper blew up because you
Mm-hmm.
get summoned into work. Everybody else is just trying to keep body and soul together. Journalists get their go bag, get in the car, and wait for the assignment.
Right.
I raced to the newsroom from where we were living at the time. I might have been 20 minutes away from the job. And the
Mm-hmm.
job said, of course, come in. We don't know, because it was dark, exactly what kind of destruction we've got going on, but this is a doozy. This is the big one of our nightmares. So get here as fast as you can. So we have a child and my husband was able to stay home on that day. His journalism career was more freelance than mine. I was
I
staff,
see.
he's freelance. He could stay home and tend to the house, turn off the gas, calm down our child. I loaded, I think, an additional bag because when I got the call, and I knew it was coming, I already had a go bag in my car. I added 2 more days of clothing and, toiletries to my go
Good.
bag because I wound up staying away from home, I think 3 days, maybe four. We wound
Right.
up, we camped out with the displaced citizens during the Northridge earthquake in a public park. I want to say San Fernando, outdoors because no one wanted to go indoors after Northridge. Too much had collapsed and the aftershocks were still popping off. So
Hmm.
when the sun set on that crazy day where I covered lots of fires and fallen freeways, because that was Northridge, when it came time to, I hate to say settle down because there really was no settling,
Right.
sleeping bags and in the news van in the parking lot of a public park with hundreds of other strangers. They were displaced. I was there on purpose. My home was standing, but I couldn't go back until we felt the story had been properly handled and covered. So we worked long hours, alternating shifts. Normally, my schedule of choice, and you know this, I always work the night shift. I
Yes.
preferred coming into work from 3 to midnight.
Hmm.
The running joke for us nightsiders was, more newscasts, better stories, fewer
Right.
bosses.
Right.
Bosses like to go home around 6:30 or 7 when
Yeah.
the main newscast is over. But you're still running around on assignment with executive producers and a whole team of people back at the mothership, the TV station, whose careers also rely on my content. So I'm not just
Mhm.
gathering news for me to put my name on or for the people who share their stories with me, but it's the whole team effort. Dozens of people you never see and learn by name are counting on me to deliver timely, informative, truthful stories in a timely manner so we can all point to that newscast with pride, come back the next day and do it again. During the Northridge earthquake, just like during Hurricane Andrew, the newscast blew out the borders. We weren't running commercials. We weren't picking up any other entertainment. We were just running the stories we felt our communities needed as long as we could find the energy and the bandwidth to tell them. We
Right.
weren't feeding the internet back then. You didn't also have to file digital stories and,
Mhm.
pound out copy on your cell phone for people to read on their cell phones. We weren't doing that during Northridge. We weren't doing that during Andrew. But those are the standards that the reporters are expected to fulfill now. Those are the new job descriptions that come with the role of storyteller. So I have mad respect for I almost said young people, but I still have some peers in the trenches. All the folks I know who practice journalism right now are expected to feed the beast,
Right.
not just the broadcast anymore, but every platform you can name that enables you to share your information as fast as possible, sometimes in real time. Bring on FaceTime, bring on TikTok. Now you're looking at the reporter right there where the freeway collapsed or the building burned or the tornado is still bouncing around the countryside. If he or she can establish a signal and tell
Mhm.
you the story right now, the expectations are that much higher because the technology has enabled us to go wall to wall with our storytelling. There's no more appointment TV.
Mhm.
You turn on your phone when you wake up. You've got it on when you're driving. You don't want to admit it, but you got it on when you're driving to keep up on the world. I used to just tune into news radio for that.
Right.
You can have news TV on in the palm of your hand.
Sure.
And you want to be safe about it, but you're expecting us, my peers who are still there, and the ones coming up behind me, to deliver the information faster than ever. So yes, mistakes are being made in the interest of haste, but I still believe to my bones that fundamental journalism is about truthful and interesting storytelling in a timely manner, and I see it being practiced all the time.
Thank you. And I have mad respect for you, and I'm going to do this because I know how humble you are about it. I'm not the only person who's called you a pioneer. Um, I know that you are someone who's also been described as someone who basically fulfilled your career in the streets. And you've told me stories about when you first came to Los Angeles. You substituted for a lot of people. There were no Black women on the anchor desk. Talk about what that was like and the things that you had to go through because, we see successes and incredibly iconic people like you, and it was not easy. And that's why I have you on this program because you are one of the people whose shoulders they now stand upon to do what they do today.
There were Black women on television in Los Angeles when I arrived,
Mm-hmm.
but not at my station.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to qualify it because I don't want to take, credit that is undue. But I was blessed with an opportunity. I didn't see how meaningful it was until I got there.
Okay.
I was hired from Miami to LA by the same company. In
Oh.
fact, by the same employer. The woman
Oh.
who hired me from Cincinnati to Miami
Uh-huh.
moved on after I got to Miami. She went to LA.
Really?
Fast forward 3 years later, she saw my work on Hurricane Andrew. Isn't it still same network? So she could
Uh-huh.
keep an eye on me. And she did. And she called me up and said, "Hey, you don't even need to interview, but come on out if you want to. We got a job for you." I said, "No, I think I need to interview. I want to see what I'm getting into because I'm loving Miami. I've got this new
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend." I'm sorry. Anyway, I took the job and I brought my boyfriend with me.
Thank
But
you.
um, the shortage of Black women on television is not unique. LA was not an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't break through until fairly recently. The station I joined, the LA station where you watched me for decades,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. They hadn't had a Black woman since 1985 on camera. They hired me in 1992. So
Uh-huh.
that's 7 years,
years.
which blew my mind when I realized when I got there. And folks said, "Hey, we're glad you're here." Or someone
Uh-huh.
like, I got the affirmative action baby stare. A lot of
Understood.
folks were very dismissive, like, "Oh, we know why you're here." They're
Yes.
checking a box.
Checking the
Excuse
box.
me, they didn't check the box for 7 years. Don't you think I might be qualified? So I
Thank
had
you.
to push back against that and prove my worth. There were Black women behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
at the station I joined. And God bless them. They embraced me. They supported me from day one. Told me where I could get my hair done and good places to live, things like that. But they
Right.
also backed my play at work because I'm in the streets. I'm on live TV. I don't know what's being said behind my back when I'm not in the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there was a lot of skepticism because you get like a 2 day orientation. Once you take the job, you move in, here's your desk. Now go meet your photographer, get to work. And I did
Wow.
that because that's what I did at every other station before that.
Yes.
It's not unique. But I also knew that I looked around and okay, there's all these Black people, men and women, on the assignment desk, in the production space, you know, secretaries, and you name it. We covered all the other job descriptions. But on
I see.
camera, there was just little old me. There were two Black guys there, don't get me wrong, but no Black women. So I
Mm-hmm.
got the warm welcome, I got the dap, I got the look, I got the love, and I got the skepticism. So I
Right.
did my first report, my first live report. It was something benign. And apparently, when I was finished, and I wasn't there to see this, but I heard it later, applause broke out. Like spontaneous applause from all the Black employees, like, "She made the cut. She knows what she's doing. We don't have to stress." I knew what I
Mm-hmm.
was doing in Miami, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Miami is a pressure cooker. I
Right.
think I knew what I was doing in Cincinnati too, because it is not a small market and all kinds of crazy stuff popped off in Cincinnati. I covered Pete Rose, the record
Yes.
breaking, and we all did the record breaking hit and then
Sure.
the trial for income tax. We
Is
all
that
covered
right?
Pete Rose. And they're big stories everywhere you look. And even if they're not big, they're interesting, they're important, and you still have to get your facts straight. I
Right.
had done that for 11 years before LA.
Mm-hmm.
And still, I got the side eye from some folks who thought I didn't deserve to be there.
Of
But
course.
that's okay. I think I proved them wrong. I mean, longevity is the best revenge, right? I lasted
Mm-hmm.
30 years in LA. But my first couple of days, it was wobbly. Not because I wasn't sure what I was doing, but people were holding their breath when I was on the air. Like, "Lord, please don't let her fail. We'll go another 7 years without a Black woman," which is foul and unfair, but that's life.
Yes. Yes. We
So when I
carry a
proved that I
heavy
knew what I was
weight.
doing, they threw everything but the kitchen sink at me. And yes, I substitute anchored all over the spectrum. I did get, for a short time, an anchor opportunity at that same station. I anchored
Okay.
weekend mornings, which is 2 days out of five. It
That's
means
when I used to see you.
I was still in the streets three
Yeah.
days or three
Mm-hmm.
nights a week, and then I would, shake off the cobwebs and come in on the morning shift, which really is unnatural. Nobody should be coming to work at 4 in the morning, but there you go. I did that, and then I would later report for the rest of the day. And anchoring is a kick because you're in the saddle for the whole hour or 90 minutes
Yes.
that the show happens to be. So little kids wake up waiting for the Saturday cartoons and they see the news lady who
Right.
maybe looks like them.
Thank you.
They're not up at 11 o'clock. They wouldn't see me Monday through Friday, but they
Mm-mm.
would see me on the breakfast news, on the weekends, when school is out and their day is to play. Before they play, they might watch TV, which is what I learned after I got off that schedule and was able to go back to church, because you can't go to church when you work on Sundays.
Yeah.
So when my 3 years on the anchor desk, evolved into another full-time opportunity in the streets, which was a transition that was not a problem for me because weekends are hard
Right.
and I was missing church
Uh-huh.
and they didn't dock my pay. When I left the anchor desk and went back to reporting, they didn't dock my pay. Yeah,
Ah,
we call that
nice.
winning. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, after all that was said and done, and I wound up going back to church on a regular, the little girls in the church choir cracked me up because they were the ones who ran to me and said, "We know who you are. We seen you on TV. You're the morning news lady." And the only reason they saw me was that I had that anchor gig on
Uh-huh.
Saturdays and Sundays. School children, they see more than we give them credit for. They were watching me waiting on the cartoons.
Is that
And they
right?
made the connection. And years later, when they did a career day at my same church, one
Uh-huh.
little girl dressed up as me. I hollered. She ran out and got a wig and put on, professional clothing like I used to wear, at least from the waist up, on television, because she was going to be me. And she did the whole whiteboard. She
Uh-huh.
looked up my bio on Google. It was hilarious. She had some old photos of me that she had printed on her printer at home.
That's
And the students
fantastic.
were asked to find somebody you admire and
Mhm.
come as them. So they were kids coming, as Thurgood Marshall and, Althea Gibson. And this little black girl decided she was going to come as me.
I'm
And
so
that,
glad she did.
my heart almost burst out of my chest.
Mm-hmm. That's outstanding. And
So
and
the anchor thing has its place. And nothing against being in the streets, because
yeah.
I was in the streets. God, it sounds kind of sleazy when you say I was in the streets, but I was for most of my career by choice. I
Thank you.
enjoyed it immensely. You don't meet people sitting in the studio. You meet the people
Yeah,
whose
I met
stories
you
you
in the
want to
streets.
tell in
Uh,
the streets.
As you described yourself as a night sider, I was a night sider when I was in law enforcement. That's pretty much how we met.
Yeah.
I worked the majority of my career at night. I worked gangs and patrol, and you were out there. So I appreciate you for doing that. And I also want to say that you've described some folks, and I'm going to put you in that category, and not by age, but by reputation, as legacy ladies. The Carol Simpsons, Pat Harvey, um, you are the
Gail Anderson. Don't forget Gail Anderson.
Gail Anderson. I mean,
Yes.
people that you're the ones I think of when I think about journalism. And again, I'm just going to give the audience a little bit of notice and information here. I mean, you brought me into NABJ because you said, Errol, what kinds of questions should we be asking when there is a terrorist attack, when there's a shooting? Where should we go? Who should we be talking to when we're talking about intelligence? And that's what got me in there. And I was able to have a totally different impression of journalism that most law enforcement people did have and still have about journalists not getting it and being biased, which is largely not true. They just want the story. And it really gave me an inside look at what happens. And because of you, I've been associated with NABC LA, I'm proud to say, for 15 years now. And my phone blows up when things happen. Unfortunately, usually bad things, but they blow up because of you. And I want to thank you for that introduction to your peers.
Well, it's mutual because without expert input, we get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it many yellow tapes and crime scenes as the supervisor on site is running away. Fire, police, you name the agency, running in the other direction. It's like, would you rather we only get it from the so-called witnesses and
Right.
the victims and the villains? If we don't hear from at least one person of authority, how are we going to put this in context? We go with
Exactly.
the okey doke in the street, we may not get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't always have time or the motivation to come back and make that correction.
So
So this is your chance to help us tighten it up. It's one and done with your help.
well, thank you very much. So you have just been incredible in terms of your career. The one thing I admire you for, you told me no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
I'm trying to get better at that. But I just want to say, what's the best advice? And you've done it now for this entire show, and I appreciate it. You're talking to young journalists. What's your advice to them? I know we've talked about videos and the videos being critiqued and what they should wear and what they shouldn't. It seems like today there are no rules when it comes to some of that. But in your with your wisdom, what are you telling the people that as you know, we've got a significant journalism school at USC in Annenberg. What's your best advice to them, knowing how much the space has changed? I mean, now if you have a cell phone, there are people who have a cell phone, they call themselves journalists, and I have my own personal opinions about that. But what are you telling them in terms of advancing their careers, networking, and getting that position that they want someday?
Well, if they want to do the legacy media, that space is shrinking. Newspapers are dying every day, it seems. And the broadcasters, who owns who, whose job is in jeopardy, whose overlords are leaning into the newsroom like never before and making editorial choices that most of us hold our noses over and would have quit had we faced those same pressures back in the day. Times have changed. Times have changed. And therefore, I beseech journalists with a capital J, not the citizens waving around a cell phone and calling themselves journalists, because that's not true. I don't
Uh-huh.
believe in citizen journalists like I don't believe in citizen surgeons.
Thank
I
you.
want someone with some training to go
Thank
out
you.
there and interview the governor, the mayor, the ICE agent, whoever it is that's making news right now. I
Mhm.
want somebody who knows what they're talking about and has some facts to back them up, to challenge authority. That is what we're here for. It's old but true. It used to be on bumper stickers and t-shirts. Comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable. That's
Wow.
what we do.
Outstanding.
Period,
Thank
full
you.
stop. That's what we do. And you can't do that without media law,
Uh-huh.
ethics, reading, writing, some arithmetic, because yes, we do use math into storytelling. All of that matters. And I don't think you can just get up off your couch, march to the incident with your cell phone, and call yourself a journalist. You're a citizen storyteller. God bless you. Jump on your podcast and your blog and go to town. But just remember, if you get sued, they're taking your house.
Yeah,
If
right.
I got sued as an NBC employee or whomever I worked for, I
Mhm.
had my boss and his whole legal team to back me up. I also had a
Absolutely.
research team to get me out the door with facts in the first place. That's the difference.
Well, Beverly, I got to tell you, I'm waiting for the memoir. You know too many people that are just historic and iconic that it shouldn't be in the book about your life as you've been able to cover them. So I want to thank you for joining us today. You are now happily retired, and but I'm not going to let you off the hook. Um, I'm waiting for the memoir. And I'm waiting for the documentary. And I think there's someone in the room there who can help with that, having just done a documentary on Caleb Quay called Louder Than
Other
Rock,
than rock.
your husband. And it's won God knows how many awards. And I think he could certainly be a producer for your life story. And I hope he does.
Well, he
So,
might be biased, so we'll see how that goes. But thank
okay.
you for at least putting it in the universe. I've been hearing from a lot of my friends in retirement that I need to slow down on the retirement track and maybe focus on the memoir. I've
Thank
never
you.
thought my story was worthy, but your opinion matters to me, so I may have to reconsider.
It
I
is
do
certainly
journal.
worthy.
I've always journaled, but I do that for mental health.
Well, I'll put it this way, and I don't say it to rain sunshine on you, although I always will. It's never, not rare, never that I say to someone, I'm friends with Beverly White, and they don't say, I know her. That's an automatic response from anybody in any discipline at any time.
And
So,
she owes me money. Do they say that too?
no, they don't say that.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Well, thank
Beverly,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and close this episode out by saying to our audience, thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside the Castle Walls. This program is produced by Maya Others. You may listen to our program on a variety of platforms identified on our site at InsideTheCastleWallsPodcast.com. That's InsideTheCastleWallsPodcast.com. Discover the other extraordinary people who joined us to share their successes, to get inside the castle and become the solution we are looking for. Beverly, you're a gem, and I can't wait till the book comes out.
Thank you, Errol. Be well.
Okay, you too.